Alright, in this lesson we are going to do color correction. About time, right? So we've done our little auto machine here on the blacks and whites, and we're going to be doing some alterations to the beauty pass, specifically the combination of the direct and the indirect, using a little planar track thing. And then, of course, we're going to have to come back over here and reanalyze with this tool here because our blacks and whites are changing up here. So what's the difference? Like, what do we choose to color correct in the beauty pass setup, and what do we choose to color correct, say, in this area right here? Well, again, it all depends, and you're going to find yourself that there's no written rules on any of this stuff. There might be a couple. I might have some snobby compositors out there being like, "You're doing it all wrong." If I am doing it all wrong, please do me a favor and email me and let me know what I'm doing wrong, and I'll try to fix it. Again, I have come from a game design background. I'm kind of just kind of putting out a disclaimer here. I come from a game design background. I have taught visual effects. I have VFX supervised 3 feature films. I have worked on a series of television commercials. I've worked in cinematics and game design. So I don't know all the tricks of the trade, but I did actually learn from two guys that are at the top of their field, one of which is at Industrial Lights and Magic and a lead there. So I got a little bit of background here, but if there's anything in here that you kind of look at and you go, oh, blah, 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 that's doing it all wrong. I've actually had a student of mine who was the head of the mill, and he'll go up and at our user group meetups and be like, Matt taught me compositing, and yet later on they'll come to me and later on be like, your students are doing this weird thing. Who taught you that? And I'd be like, nobody, I just made it up. So again, nobody's perfect, so don't rip my head off. And don't take what I say as doctrine here. So just do basically whatever you feel is right from the other things that you've learned from. But just chill out and just enjoy the show. So I'm going to go ahead and close down my properties bin here. I'm going to put this back to 1, by the way, so we kind of get started. So the first thing I can take a look at, and this is where you have to walk away from being a compositor or robot and think about things in the real world. So this thing's metal, right? Let's take a look at this thing down here, right? This is real. So it's metal. I mean, look at the contrast between this and this thing over here. This is like concrete, right? I don't know what it is, but this is like metallic. So the difference in contrast is huge, right? So you might look at this screen here and go, wow, look how contrasty that is to this. I need to darken that sign, or I need to make it more green. But then you could look over here and go, this is contrasty too. The only difference I would say is this does need to be a little bit darkened. The highlight information might be a little bit too intense. You can see the highlight information down here. It's always good to look in your scene and kind of look for things that kind of, make, look real. The other thing to realize is this thing's metal, or at least that's the way I designed it. And yeah, obviously metal's going to reflect, and if metal's going to reflect, it's going to reflect this little green area right here into this here. So you're probably going to get a little bit of green tinge or whatever reflecting into this area here. So you can see this is very magenta, this is very green, or teal, I should say. This guy's sticking out like a sore thumb. He's ridiculously bright. Again, he doesn't really kind of blend in necessarily with the shadows. We're getting shadows built up here, but then we're not getting enough shadows here, and this sucker's just super bright. And you can see this a lot if you just hit the letter Y. And you can see the luminance values here. In here, you can see that it's just there's a lot of difference here. The blacks and the whites are set, but the color information is just a little bit crazy. So anyway, let's just go ahead and keep looking around here. So the saturation, obviously, on these buttons is a little too much. The only thing in the real world that's this saturated is flowers and so forth, and even buttons, and the way that the camera registers the footage obviously requires me to do a little bit of saturation or desaturation on here. So here you can see my emissive pass. I'm going to go ahead and add a saturation node on here, past the grade node here. And I'm just going to take this down just a hair, because I just don't think it would be that saturated. And I can also play with a couple of these buttons if I wish. We can do all types of masking in here as well. So we could have certain buttons blinking, some buttons turned off and on. So there's a lot to kind of break up the patterns. You're always breaking up patterns, whether you're modeling or doing compositing. If there's something CG in your shot and you're sitting there like, oh, this is a little bit too much, when it comes to just the pattern that seems to pop up, meaning this yellow, red, and yellow, here it is, everywhere. So again, to kind of break that up, look at the highlight information. Is it really that hot coming from above? Is the light kind of intensifying that much? So for instance, the specular pass, I can go to the grade here, and basically it multipliers an on-off. I can bring this down to nothing. It dulls down my highlights. And you can see that makes a world of difference, right? So I can bring that up, I can bring that down. Now remember that even if I change the multiplication of the color information here, once I set my blacks and whites again, it's going to pop again. So again, you got to be kind of make the decision of what you want. So I might dial this down. Might give it a little bit of a blue tinge if I wish, or a warmer tinge. I don't know. We'll find out in a minute here. Let's see what else we got here. Okay, so let's start color correcting these objects. Now let me kind of look at this. And the first thing I'm going to do is start with the old classic 2D style. So I have one of these rotos here. And at this point, if I put my viewer here to this, put this to 2, and you can see that I have the different objects. And obviously, this screen's a lot brighter than the everything else here. You know, I don't understand what would be above the actual scene here, and casting the shadows might not have been right. So you can do a whole bunch of stuff with this roto tool. So let's go ahead and take care of that. So let's start with this guy right here. So let's add a grade node, and I'll plug in this mask. Oops, let me just plug this into my grade here. And I'm going to plug this into the grade node, or to the roto node. And I have nothing in this folder, so all I'm going to do is just come in here and color correct this whole area here. So you can see it's going to stick with it pretty solid. You know, you might want to scrub through the whole thing, just make sure that it works properly. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and put my viewer to 1, so I can kind of see it. And now I can come in here and do some color correction work on here. So I will go ahead and grab this grade node here and start to play with this. So I'll probably take the multiplier and probably bring that down a little bit. I might take the gamma down a little bit too. So you can see it's starting to blend it in. And again, you can take a look at your saturation node if you prefer, which I have down here. And you can see how this is very teal, this is very blue. So I can take my multiplier or even my gamma and hold down control. And I can come in here and just start moving this towards the teal. Teal is a combination of blue and green. So the kind of question here is I probably want to add a little bit of green here. So I'll move myself towards green. And that's obviously too much. And this is where you really want to turn off your color, the wheel, just get the full bars and the full length of the bars so you can do slight tweaks here. So you can see I could take this and start moving this towards teal. And now you can see it's starting to match up a lot better. So I'll put this back to 1. You can see that the matchup is pretty nice. Let's go ahead and see how it looks. So I'm going to turn this off and on. So this is the before, again, a huge night and day difference, and it's really starting to blend into the actual scene here. Let's take a look at some of these other things. Now this guy is going to be something I'm going to have to color correct separately because it overlaps. You can see here at frame 106, these two overlap. This is where 3D based color correction might come into effect. I think what I'm going to do at this moment in time is try to grab this piece right here and do some color correction because it does seem a little bit like it might need a little bit of gamma increase or something. So I'll add a grade node here. I will take this roto node. Make sure the background is not connected to nothing, by the way. You want to have this all by itself. Even though we did the tracking with it attached up here, you want to make sure this is disconnected. So I'm going to copy and paste this. And it's pretty simple. I just take this Bezier, and this stuff sticks like glue. These rotos will stick like glue onto your model because of the planar tracking. And you can label these grades if you want individually, but I'm just going to be lazy. It's good to be respectful to the future, compositors that will open up your comp. You will not be the only one opening up your comp, so having a continuity with your other team members is highly important. Try to conform yourself, or at least use their favored versions. If they prefer using merges over alpha merges when it comes to alpha keying, then do that. Again, just try to conform to everybody's sort of reality. There are some unwritten rules in this compositing world. Alright, so now I can take this grade node and just kind of start taking a look at it, and maybe I need to bring up the gamma a little bit. I also can just color correct a certain range of darkness here. So if I find the gamma is just taking the brightest areas and making them too bright, one of the other alternatives here is I can take a color correct node right here. And what I'll do is I'll choose a range here. So here's my, let's go with our shadow areas. So here's my shadows, and I want to make sure the shadow areas affect anywhere from a value of, let's see here. So put this back here so you can see here's the highlight information. It's going to affect from 0.2 on. And what I want to do is adjust this so that the shadow information gets affected right here. So let's see here. So let's see. So you can see the shadow. There's the shadow information. So again, we have the values here. You can see if I take a look at the highlight information, highlights are not affecting anything until 0.7 on. If I go to my shadow information, it's affecting anything from 0 to 0.5. So I can extend this out a little bit. And again, I could just come over here to the shadows and start playing with the brightening of these. So I can take the gain up like this. So what's going on here is it's basically, and I'm going to plug in my mask here. It's only affecting these areas right here. So if I disable and re-enable, you can see it is affecting little areas here, but if I come over to my ranges again, you can see I'm taking the shadow gain. I can kind of limit the influence here by bringing this value down and pulling this back like that. So again, you can see if I turn this on and off, you can see it's sort of brightening up this image just ever so slightly. So again, that's just something you can do as well. Let's talk about three-dimensional keying. I'm going to shuffle out the position pass. So we will take the position pass here and shuffle it out. So I will take that and do a shuffle position pass, or P. So the position pass is R, G, and B, red, green, and blue, X, Y, and Z. So you can kind of tell just by looking at this, oops, that if you hit R, G, and B and you play with the gradients, you can see which direction this is going in. So the blue channel, if you take a look at the blue channel, you could see that I believe this is the channel we're looking for, because we want to basically create a mask along the wall here and extend it out. Whereas the red channel, if we kind of play with that a little bit, you can see it's going from left to right. So left to right is the X channel, forward to backward is the Z channel, and then if I go to the green channel, you can see it's up and down. So that means I'm going to take this shuffle node and I'm going to flood all channels to Z. So it's all the same. Then I'm going to grade this based on the readings I get from the sublax and super white values in here. These will be values above 1 and below 0. So if I come over here and hold down Control and scrub, you can see that I'm getting values from 0 to about 0.18. or 0.02. So from 0 to 0.02 is what we're going to choose. So I'll take my grade node and put this to 0.02 and put this to 0. And now if I take a look at the grade, you can see what happened. So the white areas are going to get graded and the black areas are going to stay the same. Now there's a very harsh fall off here. So if you take your gamma, you can slide that back and you'll get a nice gradient in between here. And by extending out the black point, by grabbing a little number there and using your middle mouse scroll wheel, you can extend this back and pull it back like that. So you get a nice gradient. And that might be too much, but I'm going to be able to just grade the areas of white. So you can see as I kind of scrub through the shot, nothing changes because those values are all locked into three-dimensional positions. This is a beautiful way, without even having to do any roto work or animated roto work, to mask out certain areas. So again, I'm going to pull this back to a 2, maybe even a, let's say like a 2 there, and then I'll play with my gamma a little bit, and I'll pull it. I'm going to pull it back a little bit. You can overcrank this by taking your wheel back like that. And so now I have a gradient that I can use that is for masking. So now I can hit the grade node like this, pull it in, and pull this in here like that, and grade it. So I will put my viewer back to the original position here. Back to the original. All the way down the pipe. And I get back into color mode here. And you can see if I take this grade node and put the gain down, we are going to get, if I did it right, you can see nothing's happening. Why is nothing happening? Well, because the mask input for this grade is set to alpha, and we don't want that. We want to choose either red, green, or blue of the incoming mask input. So now you'll see we get a darkened edge. So you can see if we come over here, the before and after, this box looks like it's floating in space, but now we have this shadow we can add. So I can go ahead and take this shadow and decrease it. And now this is really starting to blend into the actual shot. You can see that going on there. Now this is a pretty harsh fall off, so again I could come over here and play with the, I could extend out, go to this grade node, and extend out this to maybe 0.3 to get a quick, longer fall off. See, I kind of pull this to 4 or 5 or something, and then I could start to pull back on the gamma a little bit. So before I had it, like I have it at 0.2 now. So again, you see how that kind of helps blend everything in here, but the danger zone is certain areas might be getting darkened too much. Like for instance, this here is getting really darkened, and then this area right here is not even needed. So how can I isolate that? Well, you can do a combination of 2D and 3D realities. So I'm going to copy and paste this roto mask here. And this roto mask, I'm going to drop out this Bezier, and I'm going to take these areas here and just, you know, I could do two of them if I want, it doesn't matter. But now I have an animated mask for this. Give it a second to update. So you can see what I have here is this alpha channel, and what I'll use is a stencil to break into the grade. So we have this information from which I can use a merge, and usually to cut into or add to, adding to a mask is setting pretty much this to mask. So if I put this plug in, it's outputting the alpha to the merge here. If I put myself to this merge node, you can see it's set to over, but usually you'll set this to something like mask, and mask will choose this area if you wish. In this case we can use over, but you can also use the stencil. So stencil will, you know, chop into. So in other words, these areas are not going to get color corrected at all. So we've made like a combination mask, and it's probably a good idea to also blur the daylights out of this just for the heck of it, so that we're basically only color correcting these areas. So we come back here now, and you can see with this turned off and on, I no longer am color correcting these two areas, but these two areas alone. So this is a pretty fast fall off, and again, you got to look at it in the fullness of the final comp here to make the judgment call. So you can see it's very subdued in that respect. It also might be too intense, so I'm going to come back over here and play around with this. So I'll go to this grade node. You do have a mix here that you can take the opacity on and off if you feel that you need to, but really it's the gain here that you might want to play with. You also have, there's a couple other things you can play around with the gamma here. You can bring the gamma down a little bit. So feel it out. You can see right here, this might be an issue where you're like, I'm getting a little bit too much going on here, or it's a little bit too dark. There's a lot of things, there's other things you can do. For instance, I could take another roto and lessen the influence there. So for instance, we could add a radial. Actually, no, let's not add a radial. Let's take this and make another copy of this, run out of space obviously. Take this Bezier off, and I can come in here and make a shape like that, hold down Control, pull out some a nice fade here, right, if we find this to be a little too much, right, and that's basically locked into position, right. So what I can do in that circumstance is use this, right, and merge that in, put this to A, and now I can start to, you can see I've basically chomped it off, but I can also take the mix down and go halfway. So the shadows are there, but they're not as much. So I'm going to go ahead and jump back to the final product here and just merge these together. So this is what the meat and potatoes of color correction is. You're just going in here and you're creating masks, and you can see if I bring this up a little bit heavier there, maybe I don't want any shadow in that area. And again, I can come back to this roto node here, and since I'm at a different frame from what I set, I can jump over to my ripple edit tool and just make a quick adjustment here. And maybe want to get a little bit more influence on my work there. There we go. I'm being a little bit sloppy in these masks, but you're getting the gist, I think. And again, you can see this can be something to dial down certain highlights. You can use masking for your spec pass. So if you see that, if you're like, this is a little bit hot up here, you can kind of dull that down. You can spend days and days and days doing this stuff. So you can see the world of difference of what we've done just by color correcting. Hit the letter Q to change the overlays and just get an idea how these things are going. So that's feeling really good. I'm kind of confident in that. With that said, I probably could color grade this thing right here. It's looking a little too dark. Maybe it needs to be brighter or something. I don't know. I could be wrong about that. Let me go to me. See here. Let's see. We're running out of space, so I'm going to try to get this stuff pushed over a little bit. If you can, always try to not bunch anything up too much, obviously, because it'll drive your fellow compositors nuts because they can't see anything. So I'm going to do one more grade here. I'm going to grab another, just copy paste this, using this thing over and over and over again here. And I'll just add, copy that blur over, plug this grade in, and I'm going to take this roto and pop out the old, put in the new. So this is going to be a little tricky because this guy is actually overlapping this one, as you can see here. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this mask. Let me grab this. Actually, I could actually use this mask over again if I want, but in this case, I'm just going to create the same mask again. So I will take the roto here, and I'll do the same thing again. Just come around this here, and I'm going to minus this against a version of this shuffle. So I'm going to take the shuffle node here, and this time, instead of shuffling my position pass to Z, I'm going to choose X, like this, and I'm going to grade it. So I'm going to put this off to the side. I'm going to put this off here. Now, running out of room. There we go. So I'll put this off to the side now. So I've shuffled again, and this is where you can start to put in these little dot nodes to not get these dumb 90-degree angles here. So I'll throw that there. Or these obtuse angles or acute angles, whatever you want to call them. So I've got this shuffled down here, and now I can actually, just by looking through this, hold down Control, sample out the area, and go, okay, I want to go as far as 0.2 and then 0. So basically I would say from 0.27 to 0.2 is what I want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and add a grade node. Again, I'm grading sub-blacks and super white values. So again, I'll just sample this again. So we're looking at 0.27. So I'll do 0.27 and maybe like a value of 0.25, right? Let's take a look at what we got. So there we go. So that means we're only going to color correct the white area, and anything beyond that is not going to get color corrected. Now I'm a little worried about this, so I might back off on my black point here. There we go. We're getting really close, and then I'll back off my white point here. It seems like this is still grabbing. I'm going to keep, there we go. Got to be very, very careful there, and then this fall off can happen. If I push it too far, I'll start doing that, but I don't want to go too far. Grabbing this and using my middle mouse scroll wheel. So now I've basically made a mask that's everything in this direction. So I can combine that information with this by doing another stencil. So again, I'll do a merge. I'll just copy this stencil here. Running out of space. So I'll take this, plug this into my blur, and I will plug in my grade into here. Again, if I can move some of this over a little bit comfortably. So I'm going to put this stencil right there. I have to move all this over a little bit. And this input's coming in here, and it's stenciling out that lower TV screen, which is what we want. There we go. So let's take a look at what the result is. So we start with this mask, and then we do this merge, or we cut this piece out. So we're combining 2D and 3D based grading, and now we will come back to, I always put my viewer, when I do all this, I got a million viewers in here, but I'm going to put this to 1, so I know number 1's going back to the final comp. And now I can start doing some grading here. So again, I could take this shuffle, and, this grade node, and start playing around with this. So this obviously needs a brightening. That's what we're doing here. So, am I in the right grade? No, I'm not. Here's the grade here. Okay, so I'm going to take this and take the gain up. And it should be, oops, let's see. I got this in reverse, so I'm going to do invert. Plug that in. Oh, is that right? Oh, you know what? I did it again. The mask has to be set to red, green, blue. So it could be red, green, or blue. I'm using the alpha accidentally. So again, I'll just come back to 1. I did it again. Go back here, put this to 1. And now we should be good. So I can now color grade this brighter or darker. And I've isolated this little chunk here to color correct. So I can make this guy brighter. I can play with, I can even do maybe a little bit of a lift if I feel. So if I could do like a 0.005 on the lift, you know, something like that. Whatever. And then you can do your gamma and brighten it up a little bit if you feel it needs to be brightened up. You could also give it a slight tinge of the color that's around here, which would reflect off of it, which would be like a warmer tone. So going into your gain and shifting the color information a little bit, we can go extreme here so you can see what I'm talking about. See that? Here's the extreme, like, woo, it's orange. But again, this would reflect onto this object. So you can color correct each individual element depending on what it's actually reflecting. In this case, you're kind of giving it a hue of, you know, you could isolate this area and have a purple color reflect in here. You can isolate this area, color correct the gain so that it has like a, you know, whatever this is, tan look into it. So again, you kind of look around at these different areas, and you might be like, you know what, these, you know, these reflections here, even though they're white, they would be reflecting this environment here. So again, you can do all types of stuff here. You can go in Spec Pass and make adjustments and do all types of fun. So I think what I'm going to do in this case is, now that we've gotten this point, we've been altering the blacks and the whites here. And actually our darkest dark might be different, so we might have to resample it. But I'm going to go back here to my overall color grade, and it says Analyze Frame 62. So we had our crop nodes positioned at frame 62. So I'm going to go to frame 62. And we're going to resample the blacks and the white samples, right? So I'm going to come in here now, and I'll hit the average intensity. The information will propagate in my white point. And we'll go here, and we will say Go Analyze Frame 62. And then we'll go to this guy here, same thing, Analyze Go. There we go. Okay, so our black points have been reset. Anything past this point now, we can go ahead and start doing some color correction on. So I'm going to try to move this stuff up a little bit. I'll bring my grade information up, and I can continue to use these passes, this information in here to color grade as we kind of move through here. So for instance, if I want to, I can copy and paste this planar here and readjust these areas here. So if I feel certain areas have too much highlight information, so we got a grade node in here and plug that across and take this and delete it. And then of course you can kind of come down here and play around a little bit if you wish. So you can see everything was brightened up a little bit because we re-registered our white point. So the highlights are blown out a little bit more. And that's where the balance comes, where you either do it previous your white point balance and post your white map balance. So here's, I'm cheating a little bit on here to do some color correction work. Now I can come in here and start playing with certain things. Like if I go to my multiplier, I can start to dial that down if I feel that's too intense, right, for that piece. Let's go back here, and I might want to move this up a little bit. So you can see all types of little cheating you can do here. I'm kind of cheating here a little bit. There we go. And then again, there's no written rules on this stuff. There is a certain degree with the ordering of this. Again, the color correction node, you can choose a specific range here to color correct. So again, if you want to go to your highlights here and affect these areas here, right? You can, and again, you could just maybe make another planar here, and we'll plug that in. And again, I will get rid of the old Bezier in here, and I'll just draw in a new one, and I would say, okay, these highlights look a little too much. So I'm going to try to shoot for, let's go here, my highlight information. Highlight information is right there, so if I take that, start to bring down the gain here. Maybe that's going to pull it down a little bit. I probably should just add in another grade node here. So I'm going to disable this. I'm going to get rid of this guy. There we go. I'll just throw this guy in here. And then I'll take the multiplier, bring that down. So again, this is just a matter of you kind of playing around here. Again, as you darken this, as you take the multiplier down, you could be changing your black point. So that's why maybe, let's see if we do like a gray, let's do a color correct node again here, and plug in a mask. I could isolate this out without touching my blacks and my whites. So again, your midtones are here. I can go and change my ranges so that I'm affecting like 0.3 to 0.7 or something. Right, so pull these out like this, like that. And okay, so now I'm just affecting that area. So that's my midtones. You can see if I look at the ranges, I go to the midtones, this is the area I want to affect. And I could start bringing the gamma down on that. So you can see, you got to be careful because you can break the color correction as I did right here. So I could start to bring down the gain a little bit. Make it all down a little bit. And then of course, I'm not affecting the highlights, but if I wanted to, I could. I can come in here and start bringing the highlight information down. And the good thing about this is as I bring the highlight information down, or the values from 0.7 on, I'm not touching the blacks or darkening the blacks. So this operation is basically, if I go to the highlights and I start to bring down the gain, I'm not affecting the black point and lowering the black point, because that would change the black point, which we fixed up here. So lots of stuff you can play around with. Like I said, you can come in here and make slight adjustments and so forth. And what I'm going to do between this lesson and the next lesson is I'm going to come in here and color correct and put a ton of junk in here with the techniques I just showed you. And you're going to be able to look at the final comp and examine it when I hand it up onto my hard drive, up onto my server on my website or wherever. You're going to be able to look at it and go, oh, I see what he did, and just examine it. The best way I learned in production was when I was working on these commercials and I had these geniuses around me who had worked for over 10, 15 years in the industry. I was like, I want to get a hold of your comps and look at them. So I would actually ask the different people there. I'd say, can I look at your comps? Do I have your permission to look at your comps? Can I copy paste them, go look at them at home if I need to? And they were like, yeah, go ahead, just make sure you save a different version. Of course, they know production and know the mistakes that have happened, so I was very careful not to erase the work they were doing while trying to do that. But I learned from just looking at their compositions and playing around. So once you make a couple adjustments here, a lot of your work is going to consist here. But you have to be careful post the black point and the white point. And when you do color correction, you're very careful not to change the black point and the white point at this position. Because if you do any color correction that multiplies up without actually masking out the highlights, you'll actually end up changing the white point. If you end up multiplying down with the ground, you'll actually adjust the black point. So you have to be careful not to change that information at this point. But at this point, you can add a ton of color correction here and really massage this in. And I'm also going to add blinking lights to these little buttons, and I might change up a hue shift on them too. And that, of course, would be coming in here to the actual emissive pass, which is this, and changing this up with masks and color correcting them off or on. And so you'll see in the next comp what the final result will be. So again, this is time for you to play and get to know your comp, and then again, I'm just going to go in and spend some time. This stuff takes time. You know, we color correcting all day long. I mean, I could sit here for 10 hours doing color correction, but it'd be a very boring video, right? But I'm showing you the basics. I'm going to employ what I just showed you, and then you'll be able to look at it on your own by examining the comp. So I will see you back in a bit.